Just imagine, a lifetime of silence. From her very first breath, the daughter of a man who could buy the world had never gifted that same world with a single sound. The greatest specialists, the most brilliant minds, had all signed the same cruel sentence. She would never speak. But what if fate, in its infinite and mysterious wisdom, had a different plan? On an ordinary day in the beating heart of Central Park, a little girl, with bare feet and a soul full of a richness that no money can buy, approached. In her hands, a small vial, almost a treasure, held a liquid that shone like melted gold. With a voice that was pure melody, she whispered, "Drink, and your voice will be born." The girl drank, an act of pure faith, and in seconds the silence of a lifetime was shattered by something so powerful, so miraculous, that it left even her father, the man with a heart of stone, completely breathless. On that morning, which seemed as if it were painted by hand, the central square was overflowing with life. It was a symphony of flower vendors, artists who defied gravity, and children whose laughter chased unsuspecting pigeons. And in the midst of all this humanity, one man was a dissonant note: Leopoldo Santan. You would recognize him from a distance. The impeccable suit, the Swiss watch that screamed of wealth, and the walk of someone who feels he owns the ground he treads on. He was a millionaire, a man accustomed to bending the world to his will with the power of money. Cold, arrogant, incapable of seeing value in anything that couldn't be priced. Greedy to the last fiber of his being. His life was a succession of deals and conquests. But behind this facade of power, he hid an open wound, a pain that consumed him in secret. His daughter, little Karina, only 5 years old, had been born mute, and no fortune, no renowned specialist in the entire world had managed to buy back the voice she had been denied. As he spoke loudly on his cell phone, gesturing with the impatience of someone who measures time in millions, Leopoldo walked away, leaving little Karina there, a blonde angel in the middle of the light-stoned square. With her curious eyes, she watched the world turn around her when, as if emerging from a dream, a small figure appeared from the crowd. It was Ivana. Her clothes were worn, her skin marked by a life that had given her no respite. But in her eyes, in her eyes there was a sweetness and a determination that could move mountains. She approached slowly, with the care of someone who doesn't want to frighten a small bird. "Hello, my name is Ivana. You look lonely. Can I stay here?" she said, and her voice was a comfort. Karina looked up. She couldn't answer, of course, but her clear eyes, limpid as a lake, said everything Ivana needed to hear, a silent, profound yes. Sitting beside her, Ivana smiled, a smile that was a safe harbor in the midst of the chaos. "I know you don't talk, but that's okay. I can talk for both of us and you just look at me, all right?" she said, fixing a lock of disheveled hair, and, for the first time, a silent laugh escaped Karina, a tremor of joy that enchanted her new friend. It was as if, in that instant, she had found someone who finally saw her for who she truly was. It was then that the moment became magical. From her small hands, Ivana took out the glass vial she guarded so carefully. Inside, the golden liquid danced under the sun. She held it up, and her voice sounded like a secret shared between souls. "My grandmother said this has power. Maybe it can help you speak. Drink, and your voice will be born." Karina's eyes sparkled. There was hesitation, but the trust in that tender gaze overcame any fear. She moved closer, and Ivana, with a gesture of pure delicacy, tilted the vial, letting the liquid trickle into her mouth. But in that exact instant, the figure of Leopoldo appeared, his face transformed into a mask of horror. "What are you doing?" he roared, snatching the vial from his daughter's hands and pushing Ivana with a violence that made the air freeze. The vial shattered on the ground, 1,000 pieces of glass spreading a bitter smell. The people around were startled, but Leopoldo didn't care about the world. He grabbed the poor girl's arm and shouted with all the venom he carried, "Get out of my sight, you street urchin! Don't you ever come near my daughter again!" Ivana's eyes filled with tears and she ran, sobbing, disappearing into the crowd that did nothing. And Karina, our little Karina, who until then had been watching everything, brought her hands to her throat. Her little body trembled, her eyes flooded, and then between the sobs that shook her chest, an unexpected sound, a miracle, escaped her lips. Da, da. Leopoldo froze, his eyes widened, his entire body trembled. That word, the word he had dreamed of for 5 long years, now danced in the air coming from his daughter's mouth. Karina. "Say it again, please," he whispered, falling to his knees, his arrogance melting into pure disbelief. The girl hugged him with all her might, repeating with a trembling voice, "Daddy, Daddy." And Leopoldo's tears fell, uncontrolled, washing a face accustomed to being a fortress. He held her against his chest, rocking her, fearing that the miracle might vanish. And when he finally looked up, searching for the girl who had brought this magic, he found only the emptiness of the square. That night, Leopoldo's mansion, so accustomed to the oppressive silence of its cold corridors, seemed like a completely different place. It was as if the walls, once deaf, now had ears. Karina, with a voice still fragile, almost hoarse, dared to draw her first words, like someone fumbling in a dark room who suddenly finds the light. "Dad, I want bread," she said with effort, but with a disarming sweetness. Leopoldo's eyes widened, each syllable sounding to him like the purest of melodies. "My God, you're really talking," he murmured, his face in his hands, unable to contain his emotion. The maids, rare witnesses to any feeling from their employer, peeked through the doorways with discreet tears rolling down their faces. The girl smiled, repeating simple words, and her father, the man who commanded empires, was there, on his knees, like a subject before his queen. "Say it again, my child. Say whatever you want, anything," he pleaded, his voice choked with emotion. And she, excited, completed small phrases, each one a triumph. Karina's pure laughter echoed through the house, a sound that had not been heard there for years. Dinner, normally a silent ritual, turned into a celebration. Leopoldo, who had never had the patience to listen to anyone, now leaned in, absorbing every sound. "Dad, I'm happy," she said, and he almost fell out of his chair, his hand on his heart, as if those 3 words were the biggest contract he had ever signed. Hours later, in the immense bedroom, Karina snuggled into bed. Leopoldo sat on the edge, unable to leave. She looked at him with the seriousness that only children possess and said softly, "I want to go to the square tomorrow. I want to say thank you." He swallowed hard. The image of the poor girl, of the broken vial, of that pleading look. It all came back with overwhelming force. "I don't know if that's a good idea, Karina," he tried to say, but his voice faltered. How could he deny anything to the one who now called him Daddy? For the first time in years, there were no business deals, no profits, only the desire not to disappoint those shining little eyes. "All right, tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll go to the square," he relented. Karina smiled and fell asleep, but Leopoldo remained there, motionless, while an idea, a still murky plan, began to form in his greedy mind, growing like a silent shadow within him. The next morning, when the luxury car stopped at the central square, the air seemed different. It wasn't a business appointment, it wasn't a social event, it was a mission. Inside the car, Karina, still marveling at her own voice, repeated softly, "Yes, Dad, I really am talking. I really am." And her joy illuminated everything. Leopoldo smiled, a proud father's smile, but behind it, his eyes calculated, trying to decipher the origin of that impossibility. "Come on, Dad. I want to find the girl. I want to thank her," said Karina, pulling him by the hand. And there she was. In the middle of the crowd, Ivana looked like a small point of resistance, hugging herself as if trying to keep warm from the world's cold. Karina ran without thinking. "You!" she exclaimed, her voice firm. Ivana turned, and a sweet smile bloomed on her face. The hug between the two was a reunion of souls. "Thank you. Thank you for giving me my voice," Karina said, tears shining in her eyes. Leopoldo approached, his chest heavy with a mix of pride and shame. "I need to apologize," he began, the words coming out with difficulty. "For what happened yesterday." Ivana looked at him, suspicious, in silence. It was then that he asked the question that consumed him. "What? What was in that vial?" His voice was low, urgent. Karina repeated innocently, "Yes, tell us." Ivana took a deep breath and with an almost sacred delicacy answered, "It was a tea. My grandmother taught me how to make it before she died. She said it was an inheritance, a gift, my greatest treasure." Leopoldo fell silent, absorbing every word, and his gaze changed. Disbelief gave way to a poorly disguised greed. Feigning admiration, he placed his hand on Ivana's shoulder. "You did something extraordinary. A thank you is not enough. Come with us. I want you to be treated as you deserve." The tone seemed gentle, but there was a calculated coldness behind each syllable. "Yes, Ivana, you'll love our house," Karina added, beaming. Ivana hesitated. Her instinct screamed danger, but Karina's embrace and the promise of a home made her give in. "All right, I'll go." And as the two girls celebrated, Leopoldo smiled. It was not gratitude that he felt. It was the scent of an opportunity. The true price of that miracle, he knew, was yet to be charged. When the gates of that immense mansion opened, Ivana felt as if she were stepping onto another planet. Outside, the world was harsh, hurried. Inside, perfect gardens and marble statues seemed to watch her every step. "You're going to like it here," Karina said, pulling her hand, but Ivana felt a discomfort, a grandeur that oppressed her. The breakfast table looked like a king's banquet. "This house is also yours. Eat whatever you want," said Leopoldo, with the pose of a host who in truth had never shared anything. And so began the days of calculated kindness. New clothes made of fabrics Ivana had never touched. Expensive toys, porcelain dolls that seemed to have souls. Food she didn't even know the names of. For Karina, it was a dream. Her new friend, there, by her side. She didn't realize that every gift, every smile from her father was part of a plan. Ivana, little by little, began to relax. She ran through the gardens, her laughter filling the silence of that house, echoing through the corridors like a song of life. And from a distance, Leopoldo watched. Seated in his leather armchair, he didn't see two little girls playing. He saw a key, and he was patiently waiting for the right moment to use it. It was on a late afternoon in the garden that he approached, his kindness as sharp as a knife. "Ivana, that tea, it's truly special. Do you remember how your grandmother prepared it?" The girl, touched by the memory, began to speak. She told him about the sage and mint leaves picked in the morning dew. She spoke of the ginger root, the wild honey, the chamomile flowers. "Everything had to boil for exactly 7 minutes," she would say, her eyes lost in memory. Leopoldo absorbed every detail, every mixing time, every secret, like a thief memorizing the combination to a safe. The more she spoke, the more Ivana felt that his gaze was not one of admiration, but of pure greed. She tried to change the subject, but it was too late. That night, in the luxurious guest room, Ivana couldn't sleep. Leopoldo's smile haunted her. Behind that courtesy, there was a shadow, and she knew with a certainty that chilled her soul that she had revealed more than she should have. A plan, silent and desperate, began to take shape in her mind. Ivana's days in the mansion which began like a fairy tale, soon proved to be a trap. Leopoldo, the cold strategist, already had what he wanted. He had observed her, studied her, and extracted from her every detail of the miraculous recipe. With each innocent conversation, he got closer to the complete formula. And when he felt he had enough, the mask of generosity fell with a dull thud. The poor girl was no longer of any use to him. On a heavy, suffocating afternoon, he called her to his office, a sanctuary of power and coldness. "I need to speak with her," he told Karina, and his tone allowed no refusal. Inside the room, a black backpack full of money sat on the desk. "Ivana," he began, his voice as sharp as glass, "you gave me what I wanted. The recipe is complete. There's no reason for you to stay anymore. Take your backpack and leave." The girl's eyes widened. "But I didn't ask for anything. I just wanted to play with Karina." Her voice was a thread. "I'm not interested in games. I'm interested in results. And you have already served your purpose," he said, pushing the backpack towards her. "This is more money than you'll see in your entire life. Now get out of my house." Hot tears rolled down Ivana's face. "You never wanted to help me. You just wanted the recipe," she whispered. "Enough," he shouted, slamming his hand on the desk. At that moment, Karina ran in, her face pale with terror. "Dad, stop! Don't hurt her!" But he didn't hear her. He dragged Ivana down the hall and at the main door threw her out as if she were trash. "Get out of here!" he yelled. Ivana, with a trembling dignity, looked at Karina, who was sobbing on the floor. "Don't cry," she said with a firm voice. "You already have what you always wanted. Cherish it with love." And she ran, disappearing down the street. From the floor, Karina screamed with all the force of her newly awakened lungs, "I hate you, Dad." But Leopoldo remained at the door, impassive. In his mind, there was no room for his daughter's cries. The only sound he heard was the imaginary clinking of the gold coins that were to come. With the coldness of one who turns lives into spreadsheets, Leopoldo plunged into his ambition. He assembled teams, scientists, lawyers. The recipe was liquid gold, in elegant vials with a pompous name, Hope Tea. He sold the world a promise, charging prices that turned others' pain into a luxury item. "In a few weeks I'll be bigger than ever," he thought. The image of a tearful Ivana completely erased from his mind. The advertising was overwhelming. Emotional commercials, ads everywhere. Recover what you've lost, rediscover your voice. And people, driven by desperation, bought it. Families sold what little they had for a vial of hope. From the top of his glass office, Leopoldo watched the charts climb. "They buy hope and I sell miracles," he laughed. For a few days, the world bowed at his feet. But the illusion, like smoke, did not take long to dissipate. "Your father is a genius," he told Karina, attempting a reconciliation. "This isn't a miracle, Dad, it's a lie," she replied, and the sentence echoed. The first complaints emerged timidly. "Isolated cases," he scoffed, but soon they became an avalanche. Moving videos flooded the internet. "My son still doesn't speak, and now we have nothing left," cried a mother. Doctors debunked the cure. The lawsuits began to arrive. The fall was as swift as the rise. The genius became a charlatan. Investors fled, stocks plummeted, and the empire crumbled. "This can't be happening to me," he muttered, walking in circles, lost in his own greed. The final blow came from his own daughter. "You deceived everyone, and you deceived me too," said Karina, her eyes full of a deep disappointment. "I can't call someone so evil father." The mansion became empty. The phones fell silent. And for the first time, the echo that filled the house was not of applause, but of a crushing loneliness, a defeat he did not know how to reverse. The nights in the mansion dragged on, long and unbearable. Leopoldo, the man who once dominated the world, was now a prisoner in his own home, drowning in whiskey the voice of his daughter that accused him in his thoughts. It was on one of these nights that a knock on the gate broke the silence. It was her, Ivana, standing in the rain, wrapped in her shabby coat. For a moment, something inside him broke. "Forgive me," he managed to say, the words weighing a ton, but she faced him without flinching. "I knew from the beginning that you only wanted the recipe," she said, her voice firm. "That's why I told you a fake version. I hid the truth on purpose." Leopoldo's blood boiled. "Ungrateful girl. You dared to deceive me?" "Dad, enough!" shouted Karina, appearing in the hallway. "Listen!" Ivana took a deep breath. "I came here because, despite everything, I am willing to give you the real recipe. But on one condition." Leopoldo's expression changed instantly. Hatred gave way to a sick ecstasy. "The real recipe," he murmured, laughing. "With it, I'll clear my name, rebuild my empire." "You see," interrupted Karina, her voice trembling with indignation, "you still haven't learned anything. You're still only thinking about yourself, Dad." It was then that Ivana's words struck him like arrows. "While you were dreaming of your vaults, thousands of people were crying. You stole the dreams of those who had nothing left. And you still dare to think only of saving yourself. Have you no shame?" Leopoldo was paralyzed. Each word was a sharp blade piercing his armor of arrogance. There, before those two girls, the ruthless businessman stood naked, his greed exposed. He had no answer. The silence that followed was his confession. After a long moment that felt like an eternity, Ivana's voice cut through the air again. "If you want the real recipe, you'll have to do what you've never done. Think of others." Leopoldo almost laughed. "Think of others? I have something in my hands that's worth billions, and you want me to give it away for free? Are you insane?" "Yes," she replied, unintimidated. "For free. Only then will you prove that you've learned something. If you use this recipe to make money, you will remain the same empty man." And then Karina, her voice choked but as firm as a rock, delivered the final blow. "Dad, this is your chance. This isn't about wealth. It's about all the people you betrayed. You have the opportunity to fix everything." And it was there in that instant that something inside him finally broke. The avalanche of memories, of mistakes, of pain caused, it all crashed down on him. The face accustomed to smiling for contracts now contorted in shame. The tears came, not of anger, but of a regret he never thought he was capable of feeling. "I was ambitious, cruel. I lied," he confessed, his voice broken. "I believed the world existed to bow to my money. I was wrong. It's over. I'm going to change." The next morning, the unimaginable happened. The same machines that produced luxury now filled vials with the real tea, the golden liquid of hope, and the first shipments were sent not to expensive stores, but to hospitals, schools, and communities. For free, the videos began to appear, one after another, weaving a collective miracle. A mother hugging her son who, for the first time, said, "Mommy." An elderly man starting to hum a lullaby to his grandchildren again. Each story was a balm on the country's open wound. In the mansion, Leopoldo watched it all, and the tears that now ran down his face were not of shame, but of an emotion he couldn't name. "I didn't know it would be like this," he murmured. Karina held Ivana's hand and, looking at her father, said, "Now you understand. The real miracle wasn't giving me my voice back, but teaching us how to use it to help others." And for the first time, Leopoldo was not the author of a plot of greed, but just a small part of a miracle that no money in the world could ever buy. Weeks later, the name Leopoldo, once synonymous with fraud, began to be whispered with hope. The lawsuits were withdrawn, replaced by letters of gratitude, and then the invitation to speak arrived. The hall was packed. The business world, the press, the families, everyone was there to see him. When he took the stage, he was no longer the haughty man from before. He was someone who carried the weight of his mistakes. "I am not responsible for this revolution," he said, his voice thick with emotion. I spent my life believing that money was everything. I was wrong. The miracle was not mine. It was two little girls. And he called them to the stage. Karina and Ivana, hand in hand, were met with a wave of applause that made the floor tremble. This is my daughter, Karina, who never gave up on the impossible. And this is Ivana, who taught me what courage is, Leopoldo continued. If so many voices resonate today, it is because they showed me that true wealth is not in what we have, but in what we can give. Karina took the microphone, her voice clear and strong. A voice is a gift, not to hurt but to transform. The audience applauded, moved. Then Ivana, with a serenity that silenced everyone, said, I had nothing, but my grandmother taught me that even the smallest gesture can heal. Never dismiss what seems small, because it is in the small things that the true miracle happens. The crowd erupted. People hugged, cried, celebrated, and Leopoldo, crying openly for the first time in public, looked at the two of them and finally understood. As they left the event, the three of them walked together, an unlikely family, forged in the fire of redemption. Now I know, he said. Having a voice isn't just about speaking, it's about using it to change lives. And Ivana and Karina smiled, knowing that this was just the beginning. Together, they showed the world that the greatest miracle happens when courage overcomes greed, and that a voice born to be heard can never be silenced. Our stories, like this one, are crossing hearts and borders, and your presence here, feeling all of this with me, makes every word worthwhile. Right here in the comments, am I seeing this from which city or country? It will be beautiful to see this map of emotions forming with your help.